She walked into the room, trembling, and the doctors could barely believe their eyes. What they discovered between her legs left everyone in stunned silence. Once upon a time, in the heart of a remote African village, there lived a young woman named Nia. Her life seemed unremarkable, or so everyone believed. But destiny had something entirely different in store for her. One fateful day, Nia began to experience a deep, inexplicable pain that seemed to grow stronger with each passing week. The village elders were baffled, the healers exhausted their knowledge, and Nia's family was filled with fear. Whispers of curses and divine punishments spread like wildfire, with no one knowing what to make of her suffering. Little did they know, Nia's journey to uncover the truth would lead her far beyond the familiar traditions of her village, into an unexpected realm of discovery, one that no one had ever imagined. Nia had always been known as one of the strongest young women in her village. She carried water from the river with ease, balancing the heavy clay pot on her head like it weighed nothing. In the fields, she worked tirelessly during harvest, her hands swift and steady. At home, she cared for her younger siblings with unmatched patience and love. But when the strange pain began, even Nia's strength couldn't withstand it. At first, she brushed it off as a common ache from a hard day's work. Life in the village was demanding, and everyone felt sore now and then. Yet this pain was different. It started as a small throb in her back, but quickly spread, crawling through her body like a relentless fire. Day by day it grew worse. Nia tried to ignore it, but the fire inside her wouldn't relent. Soon the villagers began to notice. Whispers filled the air, growing louder with each passing day. "It's a punishment," an elder said, shaking her head. "She must have angered the gods." Others had their own ideas. Some said a jealous spirit was seeking revenge. Others claimed it was a curse for some forgotten offense. Children avoided Nia's home, their wide eyes full of fear. Nia herself was confused and scared. She had always respected the gods, participated in every festival, and honored every tradition. What could she have done to deserve this? Her body grew heavier with each day, as though she carried an invisible weight. Her family grew more worried with each passing moment. Jabari, her father, sought help from Kofi, the village healer. Kofi was a man of wisdom and experience. He had cured many illnesses with his herbs and rituals. When he arrived, he brought with him a bag full of charms and remedies. He performed rituals late into the night, chanting prayers to the ancestors. Smoke from burning herbs filled the air as he sprinkled ashes around Nia's bed. He tied charms around her wrists and warned her to avoid certain foods. "These will anger the spirits further," he said. But nothing worked. Nia's condition worsened. Once full of energy, she now struggled to even walk. Her mother, Nia the elder, sat by her side, tears in her eyes. "This is no ordinary sickness," she whispered to Jabari one night. "The ancestors are trying to tell us something." But Jabari wasn't convinced. He respected their traditions, but also knew their limits. He couldn't bear to see his daughter suffer. One night, as Nia's cries of pain filled the house, Jabari made a bold decision. "I will take her to the city hospital," he said. His words were met with stunned silence. For some, the city represented modern solutions, but for many in the village, it was a place that disregarded tradition and the gods. Seeking help there was an act of defiance. "If the gods are angry," Jabari said firmly, "let them punish me, not my child." At dawn he prepared for the journey. Nia, too weak to protest, was gently lifted onto a cart. The villagers gathered to watch. Their faces were a mix of pity, disapproval, and quiet hope. The road to the city was long and uncertain. They passed dense forests and open plains, leaving behind the familiar comforts of the village. But little did they know, this journey was about to reveal a truth none of them could have ever imagined. What awaited them in the city was not only the answer to Nia's mysterious pain, but also a revelation that would forever change their beliefs and their understanding of the world. Nia's arrival at the city hospital marked the beginning of a journey into a world that felt entirely foreign to her. The bustle of the hospital, with its white-coated doctors and machines humming in the background, was nothing like the familiar sights and sounds of her village. Her family stood out in stark contrast, dressed in their traditional attire, which only intensified the feeling that they did not belong. Nia herself, though filled with fear, walked into the hospital with her head held high, trying to appear as strong as she had always been. The doctors, busy with their own tasks, barely took notice of the family at first, but the moment they were approached for evaluation, everything changed. There was no kindness in the city's medical gaze, only curiosity and skepticism. "When did the pain begin?" one of the doctors asked, his voice clinical. "Has it happened before?" another followed, scribbling notes. Nia, her voice barely a whisper, answered the questions, with Jabari translating her words into the city's language. Every question seemed to peel away another layer of her dignity, each word turning her into nothing more than a puzzle for the doctors to solve. Time seemed to stretch into eternity. Hours passed in which Nia was subjected to a flurry of tests, X-rays, scans, blood work, all of which baffled the medical team. The results were inconclusive, and the doctors could not make sense of the strange condition that plagued her body. But they were determined to find an answer. Their curiosity now piqued. Outside, in the cold, sterile hospital corridor, her family huddled together in silence. The unfamiliarity of the hospital contrasted sharply with the warmth and unity of their village. Jabari, his face etched with concern, clasped his hands tightly, whispering prayers to the ancestors, even as he placed his trust in the hands of these strangers in white coats. Beside him, Nia the elder held onto a small pouch of herbs, muttering protective incantations under her breath, her faith in the old ways never wavering. Inside the examination room, Nia felt like a specimen on display. The doctors huddled around her, whispering among themselves. Their faces were a mixture of frustration and disbelief. One doctor, a middle-aged man with sharp glasses, muttered, "This is unlike anything I've seen before." Their findings were baffling. No one could explain what was happening inside Nia's body, and the lack of clarity only deepened the tension. "We need more tests," the lead doctor insisted, though his words did little to reassure her family. Nia's father, Jabari, stood by her side, his thoughts heavy with uncertainty. Despite his firm belief in practicality, he had never faced a situation like this. His wife, Nia the elder, was even more concerned. The healer back home had tried everything, rituals, prayers, herbal remedies, but nothing had worked. As the hours stretched on, Jabari realized that he could not allow his daughter to suffer any longer. His love for Nia surpassed the fear and shame of defying tradition. Finally, in a moment of desperation, he made a decision that would change everything. He would take Nia to the city's hospital, no matter what it cost them in terms of reputation or shame. In their village, seeking medical help beyond the traditional healer was seen as a betrayal of the gods. But Jabari was willing to face the consequences. "If the gods are angry," he said to his wife, "let them punish me, not my child." The journey to the city was long and arduous. Nia's sisters, back in the village, had sent word of the family's departure, and the news had spread quickly, with the village buzzing with gossip. Nia's pain, her illness, was a subject of speculation. Was it a curse? Was she being punished for some unknown transgression? No one knew for sure, but the uncertainty only added to the weight on Jabari's shoulders. As they traveled, the feeling of isolation grew stronger. The city was a vast, cold place, a sharp contrast to the warmth of their small, tight-knit village. When Nia and her family finally arrived at the hospital, they were met with a new kind of coldness. The sterile, clinical atmosphere of the hospital was overwhelming. The city doctors seemed to view Nia not as a patient, but as a puzzle to be solved. She was prodded and poked, subjected to all manner of tests, her body a subject of scrutiny. Each examination felt more invasive than the last. The hours spent waiting in the hospital were excruciating. Nia's family sat in silence, anxiety radiating from them in waves. Jabari's face was drawn tight with worry, and Nia the elder's grip on her pouch of herbs never loosened. Despite the sterile surroundings, she still clung to her belief in the power of the old ways. The doctors, however, remained baffled. "It's unlike anything we've seen," one doctor admitted in frustration. "We can't explain it." The situation grew more tense with each passing hour. The doctors decided that exploratory surgery was the only option, warning Jabari that it was risky. Jabari hesitated. In his village, such a procedure was a violation of sacred traditions. But the thought of his daughter continuing to suffer was unbearable, so he reluctantly gave his consent. That night, as Nia lay in the hospital bed, her body exhausted from the day's events, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The doctors, with all their knowledge, were still unable to explain the mysterious condition within her. Was it some divine punishment? Was she cursed? Or was this simply a cruel twist of fate? Nia's mother sat beside her, gently holding her hand. "You are strong, my child," she whispered, her voice filled with both sorrow and hope. "The spirits will watch over you. You will survive this." Nia closed her eyes but didn't respond. Her thoughts were a jumble of doubts and fears. Was she truly strong enough to overcome this? She had always been resilient, working in the fields, caring for her siblings, and carrying heavy water containers from the river. But this pain felt different. It gnawed at her body and soul, a constant reminder that she wasn't in control. Morning arrived too soon. The surgery was scheduled, and Nia's family was asked to wait in the sterile hospital corridor. As they sat together, their worries deepened. Each passing moment stretched their nerves thin. The waiting felt like a cruel test, one that they had no choice but to endure. Back in the village, the news of Nia's condition was spreading like wildfire. The elders had gathered beneath the baobab tree, and their discussions grew more heated with each passing minute. "She has angered the gods," one elder declared, his voice rising. "She has forsaken our ways, and now she must face the consequences." Others disagreed, suggesting that perhaps the gods were not punishing her, but calling her to something greater. Was this an omen? A sign that the village needed to adapt to the changing world? The air was thick with uncertainty as the villagers debated among themselves. Meanwhile, in the sterile corridors of the hospital, Nia's family clung to each other. Nia's father sat quietly, his mind filled with worry. He couldn't help but wonder, what if his decision to bring his daughter to the city had been the wrong one? What if the spirits were angry, and this was their punishment? After what felt like an eternity, the lead doctor finally emerged, his face pale and somber. "We found something," he said, his voice low. Jabari's heart skipped a beat. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice tight with fear. The doctor took a deep breath before continuing. "It's not a tumor," he began. "It's a growth, but it's not what we thought. The tissue, it's unlike anything we've seen. It almost resembles an ancient artifact, organic but not entirely human." The revelation sent shockwaves through the family. Nia's mother gasped, clutching her herbs. Jabari, stunned, could only stand there, his mind racing with confusion. What did this mean? Was this the work of the gods? Or was it simply a rare medical condition that no one had ever encountered before? The doctors promised to continue their analysis, but for now, the family was left in a state of suspended disbelief. Nia, groggy from anesthesia, was wheeled back into her room. Her family gathered around her, the weight of the mystery pressing heavily on their hearts. Back in the village, the elders debated with renewed urgency. The news of Nia's condition had become a matter of great importance. Some saw it as a curse, while others believed it to be a sign that the village needed to change. As they argued beneath the baobab tree, the fate of Nia and the entire community seemed to hang in the balance. As the days passed, Nia remained in the hospital, her condition still unexplained. But despite the uncertainty, one thing was clear. Her story was far from over. It was a journey that would continue to unfold, a journey that would challenge everything she and her family had ever believed. Nia's illness was not just a personal battle. It was a challenge to her family's identity, their traditions, and their place in the world. The questions raised by her condition would not be answered easily. But through it all, Nia's strength remained unwavering. She would fight not just for her life, but for the future of her people, her culture, and the beliefs that had sustained them for generations. And as her journey continued, the answers would come, though not in the form that anyone had expected. The day after the surgery, the family was summoned to the hospital's main conference room. Nia, though still weak, insisted on joining them. The room was sterile and cold, with the hum of fluorescent lights above. Jabari and his wife exchanged uneasy glances as they entered, while Nia's sisters stayed back in the waiting area, too anxious to face what they might hear. The lead doctor, flanked by a team of specialists, began speaking. His tone was serious but cautious, as though he were trying to tread carefully on fragile ground. "Mr. Jabari, Mrs. Nia, and family," he said, adjusting his glasses. "What we discovered during the surgery was extraordinary." Jabari clenched his fists. "Just tell us. What is wrong with my daughter?" His voice, though steady, betrayed his fear. The doctor took a deep breath. "It wasn't a curse or a disease. Inside Nia, we found a hardened mass of tissue. But it wasn't just tissue. It was unlike anything we've seen in modern medicine. We believe it's an ossified structure, something that began forming before she was even born." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "It's shaped like a symbol. Specifically, a traditional carving we've seen in ancient African artifacts." Gasps filled the room. Nia's mother let out a low wail, clutching her chest as if the weight of the revelation had struck her physically. Jabari's eyes narrowed. "A symbol? What does that mean? How could it be inside her?" The doctor hesitated, then gestured to a nurse who brought in a tray covered with a white cloth. "This is what we removed," he said, lifting the cloth. Beneath it was an object, roughly the size of a small fruit, covered in intricate patterns. It looked like a carving, smooth, symmetrical, and ancient in design. Nia stared at it, her face pale. She felt a strange connection to the object, as though it were a part of her story she had yet to understand. Her mother whispered, "The gods, they have marked her." The doctor shook his head. "We don't believe in curses or divine markings, but the fact remains. This object's composition doesn't match any known biological structure. It's partially made of calcium, but it also contains traces of materials not found in the human body." His voice grew softer. "We can't explain how it got there." The family sat in stunned silence. Jabari, ever the practical man, was the first to speak. So what do we do now? Is she safe? The doctor nodded. Yes, she's safe. We've removed the object, and her recovery should be smooth. But he hesitated. This discovery is significant. We've contacted researchers and historians who specialize in African anthropology to examine the artifact. They believe it might hold cultural or historical significance. Nia finally spoke, her voice trembling but firm. It came from me. What does that mean for me? Her question hung in the air, loaded with a mix of fear and curiosity. Before the doctor could respond, Nia's mother intervened, her voice trembling. This is not for you to understand. This is the work of the spirits. This is why the healer couldn't cure her. The ancestors have placed this burden on her for a reason. But Jabari wasn't convinced. If it's a message, why wouldn't the gods make it clear? Why cause my daughter pain? This doesn't feel like a blessing. It feels like a curse. The debate raged on, but Nia sat quietly, staring at the object. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. The news of the discovery spread quickly, both within the hospital and back to their village. People whispered that Nia was chosen, that the artifact was a sign of her connection to the divine. Back in the village, elders argued over the meaning of the discovery. Some said it was a blessing, proof that Nia was destined for greatness. Others warned that it was a warning, a sign that their community had strayed too far from its traditions. Nia herself remained conflicted. She didn't feel like a chosen one or a cursed soul. She felt like a young woman caught in the middle of a story too big for her to understand. Yet deep down, she knew that whatever this object symbolized, it would define the course of her life. That night, as she lay in the hospital bed, Nia dreamed of her ancestors. She saw their faces, lined with wisdom and sorrow, and heard their voices calling to her. The path will not be easy, they said, but it is yours to walk. When she woke, she found her father sitting by her side, his hand resting on hers. You're stronger than anyone I know, Nia, he said quietly. Whatever this means, we'll face it together. For the first time since the ordeal began, Nia allowed herself to smile. Maybe this is just the beginning, she whispered, her eyes glancing at the covered tray where the artifact now rested. The discovery of the artifact inside Nia's body spread like wildfire, stirring both awe and fear. What had started as a medical mystery in the city hospital had quickly evolved into a larger, more complex issue that blurred the lines between science, culture, and spirituality. The doctors, overwhelmed and perplexed, found themselves at a loss for explanations. How could something so ancient, so intricately carved, end up inside a living person? Experts from various fields, anthropologists, archaeologists, and even historians, were called upon to examine the artifact. They all agreed on one thing. The carvings were strikingly similar to those found on ancient African relics. But no one could decipher its true origin or understand how it could have come to be lodged within Nia's body. The medical community remained baffled, offering only guesses about the biological anomaly it represented. Yet, in a way, the doctor's confusion only fueled the growing sense that Nia's experience was something beyond the realm of conventional understanding. For Nia, the artifact came to symbolize something far greater than just a medical mystery. It was proof of her resilience, of her survival against a force that none could explain. As she made the long journey back to her village, she felt both physically and emotionally drained. The pain from the surgery lingered, and the weight of unanswered questions pressed heavily on her heart. Yet through it all, she held her head high. She was no longer just Nia. She had become a living testament to something deeper, a symbol of strength in the face of the unknown. The villagers, however, would not see it that way. As she returned to her home, the village was thrown into a whirlwind of confusion and debate. Some elders regarded the artifact as a divine sign, a message from the ancestors. They saw Nia's suffering and the artifact's presence as evidence of a purpose yet to be revealed. These elders believed that the ancestors had chosen Nia for something special, something beyond her understanding. They gathered around the baobab tree, the sacred tree that had witnessed centuries of village history, and spoke of prophecies that had long been forgotten. But not all shared this view. Others, less inclined to see the divine in the mystery, whispered that Nia's ordeal was a curse, a punishment for the village's abandonment of tradition. They believed that the gods had sent the artifact as a reminder of the dangers of straying too far from the ways of the past. This divided the community, pitting those who saw the artifact as a sign of divine favor against those who saw it as a warning. Amidst the growing tensions, Jabari, Nia's father, became her fiercest defender. He stood before the council of elders with unwavering conviction. "She is not cursed," he declared, his voice echoing in the quiet of the gathering. "She is not the one to blame. Nia faced something that none of us could have predicted. She faced it with strength, and that is what defines her." Jabari's words carried weight, but they did little to quiet the skeptics. The debates continued, with the village divided in its interpretation of the artifact. Some wanted to see it as a sign from the ancestors, while others feared it was a warning that had been sent to punish them for abandoning their traditions. Through it all, Nia remained silent, her thoughts often turning inward. In the quiet of the fields, away from the watchful eyes of the villagers, she sought solace. There, alone with her thoughts, she began to understand that the artifact was not a burden to carry, but a bridge between the past and the future. It was a connection to something ancient, something that had been forgotten by many. The days passed, and Nia's sense of purpose grew. She no longer saw the artifact as something that had happened to her, but as a part of her story, a story that would now be told for generations to come. The village's reaction to the artifact shifted with time. Initially, it had been a source of division and confusion, but gradually, it became a part of the village's identity. The artifact was displayed for all to see, carefully protected and revered. It became a symbol of both wonder and caution, a reminder of Nia's courage and the village's delicate balance between tradition and the unknown. But for Nia, the artifact was not just a symbol of the past. It was a part of her, something that would define her for the rest of her life. As the years passed, she would come to see it as a legacy of strength, resilience, and the ability to face the unknown with unwavering determination. The village, too, would learn to see the artifact differently. What had once been a source of fear and uncertainty eventually became a point of pride. It was a reminder that the future was not always something that could be predicted, but that it could be shaped by those who had the courage to face it. Nia's journey was far from over, but as she walked through the village, the whispers and stares faded. She had become something more than just a young woman from a small village. She had become a symbol of strength, a living bridge between the past and the future. The legacy of her pain, the mystery of the artifact, and the village's response would echo through the generations, ensuring that Nia's story would never be forgotten. And as the winds of time blew across the fields, Nia stood tall, knowing that her place in the story of her village was now secure. I hope you enjoyed this tale. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.